All right, welcome to the sixth video in our series looking at creating prototypes for our digital solutions. So in this video, we're going to look at how we can use the interface elements to interact with our algorithm. In the previous video, we looked at using the simple input and print methods to interact with our system through input and output. However, we want to take advantage of the Kivy interface elements that we've created. So one little piece that we have had to add, because we didn't previously have a space for displaying error messages, is to add in a dynamic label into our grid layout, our bottom grid layout, I should say. So a slight tweak to each of our screens. You'll now see one button with space for a label, then a button underneath, and then a third label. So you'll probably notice the interface looks slightly different, and that is the reason why. So as we said, we're just going to focus on these particular parts. We don't have to necessarily worry about the user list or anything like that yet. It's purely how we input and output from our particular screens. So the interaction between our interfaces and algorithms all occurs within the main file. So we do have to do a little bit of setup. The first thing we're going to do is go into our Kivy screen, or our screens.kv file, I should say. And we currently have two text inputs called username and password. So what we need to do is we just need to define for our Python file what these are referring to. And so I'm going to use a variation of both just so you can see the difference. So we're going to say that this attribute for the login screen user is equal to our username ID, so our text input ID of username, and PWD is going to be password. Okay, so how we can access these in our Python file in our login screen is we simply need to define them. So user, and we're going to say that this is an object property in Kivy, and for the attributes we're just going to list none, and same with the password. All right, and as I'm typing, you might notice that there is a bit of an error being spat. So we do need to import this particular object. So Kivy.properties. So from the properties library, we wish to import the object property object. Okay, so now we're able to access these. So give us a bit of breathing space there. So because we want to use this username and password in our login method, which is part of a user object, is we can actually use these in our initial user setup. So we'll call this one, actually we'll just use it for a second. No, sorry. We'll call this user text, and this will be password text. So it's going to pass in these variables. We do need to create these. So user text without a capital T. And password text. So in order to access these, we simply want to say self. So within this object, we want to look at the user object. So in this case, the user object points to the object called username, which in this case is the text input for our username. We simply just want to get the text out of that element. And deal with the password. So self.password.text. Okay, so now we have ourselves our username and password text. Alright, so we're now set up to be able to access that as part of our user login. So because when we log into our user, they will already have this information, we actually do not need this input any longer. So we can get rid of this part at the start. All right, so we just need to adjust. You'll see that this spits an error, so we just need to say if self.user is equal to none. So basically the user that we assign will be assigned the username from the interface. And same thing with the password. So self.pwd is blank. And again, we get the errors here. So let's change it to self.user, self.pwd. So we now no longer have the interface or the input of the username and password won't appear in the terminal anymore. It will take it from the interface. So if we test this out and bring it over, as I said, you will notice the slight tweak in the look. The button looks a bit different, but that's okay. Right, so if we click Add Task Now, you can see it gives us username is blank. We add John. Password is blank. So we'll just use the wrong password just to get the other error message, logging failed. But when we successfully have our username and password, it then transitions as we had previously. Okay, so we'll just do the full loop. I mustn't have saved the log out button before. Let's come back with that error. That's frustrating. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Log out. There we go. Finally got it in there. So let's close that one up. So as we said, we want to be able to take these output messages and put them into that error text as well. So this will sort of show us the outputting of text. So instead of the print, what we want to do, do we want to do it here or do we want to do it here? So I've just realised that we do want to pass this error out, but how can we do that if we're only returning true or false? Well, let's just go with a simple false. So we'll print it here so we know what the error message is. Again, we can always tweak this later. Remembering this is a prototype, it doesn't all have to work perfectly. So these are all instances of it being false. So if it's that, it's false. If it's that, it's false. If it's that, it's false. Let's save that. And here, we can just say else. So basically, if our login is not a success, again, we'll have to talk to our our Kivy screen. And so you can see in this instance, instead of the variable equaling the object in reference, or the property in reference, the text within the user object, we're actually setting that this time around. We're just going to set it to say login error. So just a simple output to begin with. As you can see, this hasn't been coloured, and it will throw an error if we do run it at this point. So we do need to go back into our Kivy screen. Up. Right, and I'm just going to call these the same thing for ease of use, but we're going to say that the error object refers to the error object, which is the label in our bottom grid layout. And again, I just have to set that up as an object that we can access. So object property, none, capital N. Okay, so now we've got everything we need. So when we run, across. So if we do do it all blank. It says login error. John still says login error. We could go and test all of these by refreshing it, but when we go around, we log in. When we go back, it does have login error, so perhaps part of our log out is we would have to eliminate that from our interface. But at least now we have the input taking in the data from the interface. We also have, in this case, it is only static data, but outputting it to our dynamic label. All right, so a nice and short one there, just to talk about essentially the object property and how we use that. So just to recap, we do have to create a bridge essentially in our Kivy object, or our Kivy file, I should say, bridging the attribute of the screen object with the relevant object within the Kivy interface. We then have to define it as an object property. Obviously, you need to import that object property object in from the Kivy library or the Kivy package, the properties library. And then it's just as simple as taking that object within the login screen object and accessing its text value, whether that's taking a text input and taking the text in, or outputting to a dynamic label. Alright, so in the next video, we'll start looking at the process of how we can generate our user list by connecting our interface and code to a database.